Hey everyone, welcome to EduMatch. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today. So super excited to be back. We had a little bit of a hiatus, but now we are back with the very last Tweet and Talk of 2018. Not the last show of 2018. That's actually going to be on Tuesday, but the last Tweet and Talk of 2018. And closing it out tonight will be moderator Rachelle and all of our fantastic panelists that you see here in front of you. So we're going to kick things off with some brief intros. So Rodney, if you could please introduce yourself, tell everyone a little bit about you.
Hi, my name is Rodney Turner. I am a transplant from Arizona, now living in New Jersey. Got long sleeves on and just trying to make sure I get all this warmth that I can as I'm inside the buildings. But anyway, I work at a software company here in New Jersey, and it's been a wonderful change. But so happy to be excited to be here with Sarah and with Rachelle and other wonderful, great people whom I haven't met before, but will today.
Sweet. Well, welcome to the East Coast and welcome back to EduMatch. So great to have you, Rodney. We're going to skip over Rachelle for the time being. We're going to save her for last as she's a moderator, and we're going to go next to Paul.
All right. Good evening, everybody. And like Rodney, I am in the long sleeve club from the Garden State, New Jersey. Stand up. I'm an educational game changer from the state of New Jersey. I have worked in preschool through 12 levels. I'm currently in a preschool and grade 5-6 school as a supervisor of instruction, and I'm super excited to be with this esteemed panel. Let's get it going.
We are so excited to have you here, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the video portion of EduMatch. I know that in the past we've had you moderate on the Twitter side, so super stoked to have you here on the video panel portion. So
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Paul. All right. Next up, we have Martine. You might be muted, Martine.
Let me try again. I'm Martine Brown. I'm the instructional coach out in Garland, Texas. This is my 14th year in education. I'm excited about all things that help teachers and students learn and grow together.
Sweet. Welcome back to the panel, Martine. Glad to have you back. And thank you so much for joining us. All right. Next up, we have Dennis. We are welcoming Dennis for the first time to EduMatch. So welcome, Dennis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dennis Griffin. I'm an elementary school principal in Wisconsin. I also have really long sleeves because it gets really cold here. However, it hasn't snowed yet. I'm really excited to be here with everyone. Yes, we have no snow right now. Applauding that. Hopefully it stays a little bit longer. I'm just really here because I like to learn with others. I like to learn more about leadership and how we can empower ourselves to empower kids and create the educational systems that are going to make them better in the future.
Sweet. Well, we are so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. So welcome to EduMatch. And we are welcoming back to EduMatch, Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy Storer, and I am in Montgomery, Texas. I am a pre-K through 5th grade instructional coach, and I'm also the lead tech integration mentor for my district. I am not in long sleeves here in Texas. It's kind of cold, but not that cold, but happy to be here.
Sweet. And we are super glad to have you on, and just wanted to give a quick shout out to folks on YouTube Live. So Christy, Susie, hey, thanks so much for joining us. Everybody else who's joining us on the YouTube Live chat, give us a shout out. And we are now going to kick it off and have our awesome moderator, Rachelle, introduce herself and jump right on in.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. I am Rachelle Dene Poth. I've been teaching foreign language and STEAM for 22 years outside of Pittsburgh. So I'm also sporting like sweatshirt material that wasn't too bad today. And currently working on a couple of different writing projects. And I'm really excited about this one that's focused on quotes because I do a ton of reading. And one thing that I've noticed, a couple things. One, I don't like to write in my books for some reason. I think I just want to save them to share with other people. But the notes that I take so often have been like quotes that I've come across in the books. And those are the things that I've kind of connected with and that have, I don't know, made me rethink a lot of things that I was doing in my classroom, just my perspective about like what school should be. And so when I had this talk with you about this idea, like just in other words, which is kind of the tentative title, was just thinking about like, what have quotes inspired me to think about? What changes have I made? So that's where all of this is coming from. And there was a quote that I came across from Teddy Roosevelt, probably about 2 months ago. That was, he once said, I'm a product, or I'm a part of everything that I have read. And I thought that quote just resonated so much with me, especially over like the last 4 years. I think I didn't do any reading as far as like books in education or with technology, and started reading. The first book I read actually in this kind of area was Teach Like a Pirate. And I read through that one while riding on a train to ISTE in 2015. And in my, like one of my first Twitter chats, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, we're connecting all over the place. And so that was just the start of a bunch of reading. So for tonight's talk, what I've done is I've chosen probably between 5 and 7 quotes. And the concept in the book is just focusing on a quote, sharing my experience, but more importantly, getting the some vignettes and some chapters written by people who are out there at different roles, different places, and to get the perspective. You know, it can be such an isolating profession. And I think that the more that we can like share our stories, and you realize like that there's other people out there like you that may be having the same thoughts about like making a change and have that kind of fear, like, well, maybe I shouldn't. Well, why shouldn't you? So I'm going to kick it off with the first question. And what I'll do is I'll ask, not even a question, I'll read the quote. And then if anybody wants to, you know, think about it and just share whether there's an experience that you have. And if you want, I can even share the one that comes to mind with this one too. So if you want a thumbs up and you're like, yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing, I could totally do that. And you can still hear me, right? All right. Okay. So question number one, quote number one is probably my favorite quote that kind of really sticks with me a lot. About 1.5 years ago, I was reading a book and I came across a quote from Brene Brown in the book Daring Greatly. And it said, it's about vulnerability. So the courage to show up and be seen when you have no control over the outcome. And like, that's the greatest mean of courage, which interestingly enough, that quote stemmed from a speech given by Teddy Roosevelt, like almost 100 years ago, I think. So for me, last summer, I had some really challenging experiences where I had to do a keynote and I had to do some presentations, and I really felt like I was just going to back down, like I couldn't do it. And fortunately, I had some people who, you know, kind of lifted me up and gave me some new perspective and told me like that I could do it and do my best. And if I fell on my face, well, I did, but I did so while daring greatly and with some courage. So that's my own personal take. Whenever I have a little bit of kind of hesitancy or I get anxious about something, I keep that in the back of my mind and I share it with others. So that's what I think. But in other words, anybody have any other take on what that quote might mean for you?
I'll chime in. As you were talking, it made me think about my first year or two of teaching, because I think when you think about pre-service and those early years in education, I think this quote is the most applicable because, you know, you have no idea what's going to be the end result. It's kind of funny because I was thinking back to some of the students and some of the things that I had done and the kids who got it and the kids who didn't get it. And I remember my biggest issue was I wouldn't look at my classroom. Like I wouldn't look at my students. I'd look up, I look down, but I wouldn't look at them. And it took me like a year to really get comfortable not knowing how a lesson was going to end and being okay with it. And I think, you know, just thinking if we have any pre-service teachers who might be watching or even that first year or two, you know, it's okay to walk through those struggles. You just have to keep pushing through it. And I think that's where the courage comes from, because you can do it maybe 1 time or 2 times, but to continually do it, I think that's where true courage comes from.
Yeah. And I love the one thing that you said there too, is so often people feel like just because you're the teacher or the administrator, whatever your role is, instructional coach, that you walk in and you have all the confidence in the world. And like, why wouldn't you? You're speaking to students or you're talking about what you know. But I think that's something that we all struggle with. And for me, for years, I didn't want to speak in front of like professional development sessions. It wasn't comfortable for me. And I saw 2 students speak in front of the teachers. They were 7th graders. And I thought, they're standing up there in front of this whole room and I'm not even comfortable, which made me realize that when I have students that I wanted them to present in front of their peers and they were like, please don't make us do that. I didn't get it until I was there and I thought, wow, I wouldn't even do it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Martine, that makes a lot of sense. It really resonates, and I wanted to add to that. So Dennis and I talk about this all the time. We talk about people watching, and people are definitely watching. We put ourselves out there on social media, and we talk about a lot of different things. We talk about strengths and weaknesses and struggles and obstacles and achievements and things of that nature. But sometimes we fall short. You know, I have a hashtag PLN365 that I started about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago. And the goal was to put something out there every day. I did that for a long period of time, but truth be told, I've had some struggles lately. I've had a transition to a new position. I'm an instructional supervisor, grades 5 to 6. So there's a huge learning curve. And I try to post in the morning, and that doesn't always happen. So sometimes I get home at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and the brain is fried. So it's not always about reaching the goal. It's about making sure that you're consistently taking steps forward to improve. If you get knocked down or you fall short, you know, how are you going to respond in the next moment? So those are the lessons learned on my end.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, we are going to fall down. I literally legit fell down in front of my students a couple of years ago in a suit going in, and like, what do? You get up, and it's a good lesson for them to see, like, we all make mistakes. They're not final. It's like, what do you do from that point on to improve? Thanks, Paul.
Just going to follow up with what Paul was speaking on. I'm really into learning a lot about leadership. I read a lot of leadership books. And sometimes we forget that the odds are against us sometimes. And it takes courage to still enter an arena when you know you could lose at the end. You might potentially fail at the end of the day, but yet you show up anyway. And just by showing up, you have the power to inspire someone else, because you're engaging in what is hopefully productive conflict that will help make the world a better place. And Paul kind of mentioned this, the people watchers, and it goes back to the Teddy Roosevelt quote, at least you're in the arena. One of the things that I really try to encourage my students and even members of my staff is to make sure you never go 10 years down the road and have that what if I would have done something moment. Engage in the arena, because the worst feeling ever is to be 10 years removed, 5 years removed, and said, I should have took advantage of that opportunity and I didn't. And that really resonates with courage and engage in that productive conflict.
Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else? Don't feel pressure, because we could totally move on to the next one too. But I will say, I want to give a shout out to Susie and to Christy, who are watching now. And if they want to answer these questions too, then feel free to. So I'm going to move on to the second quote. So we know John Dewey, a lot of work in education, a lot of quotes, and a lot of people tend to know. I could probably say which quote comes to mind, and you may know, like, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. But that is not the quote that I'm choosing for this one. But the second one is, how can the child learn to be a free and responsible citizen when the teacher is bound? So if I were to just give like a short, take on that, it's, not feeling like taking risks, feeling like you have to fit into a certain system in the traditional way you've always done things because it's comfortable for you, but then asking students to take some chances with learning. And so when we're not going to do that. So that's my take. Anybody have something that you can share as that one?
I would love to share for this quote. So it made me think of a student that I had in the classroom. His name is Braden. And I have to say that, I went through college and got my master's, but it's my kids that schooled me on school and really showed me how to be the best version of myself, and the importance of growing and learning from others. So there was an instance where I'd asked my kids to show me what they know about simplifying fractions. And he asked me, well, let me back up a little bit. The first time I met him, he said, we are all robots in this school, day one of school. So I knew he was going to be fun. And so we had this assignment, this experience, and he said, can I use Minecraft and a screencasting tool to show you how to simplify fractions? And I was like, I know nothing about them. Back in the day, I didn't know anything about Minecraft and screencasting. And I said, sure. And what came of that was the most brilliant thing I have ever seen from a student, showing me what he knew, using a tool that he loved. And because I said yes, because I told him yes, our relationship changed. the way that I thought as a teacher changed. I am so thankful for him for giving me this opportunity to learn and grow with him. But it was the coolest thing ever to see him use pressure plates in Minecraft to simplify fractions. So yes, growing as a teacher, not getting complacent, and getting eager to be uncomfortable is so important.
And I do have to say, Amy, I love reading that story that you wrote about Braden. And so when you were talking, I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's the story. That's a great share. Thank you. Anybody else? Rodney, maybe?
Yeah, I'll say something. One of the things that it reminds me of, how can a child learn to be free and responsible citizen when the teacher is bound? I know that as a teacher, my first foray jumping into teaching was in a Title I school district in Phoenix. And it was tough. It was really tough. It was known as one of the toughest schools in the district. And I was coming in as a sixth grade teacher. I was the 10th sixth grade teacher out of 10 classes that were there. So they made my class because there were still too many kids, 34, 35 kids per class in the other 9 classes. Needless to say, that's my first year. But I had some significant challenges. But one of the things that I certainly did was I did bring in some tools that were extremely helpful. And Amy kind of alluded to it. It's like, hey, what can we do to increase that, to redirect this energy that's in the classroom? And one of my students, who was a handful, he loved to skateboard, and he recorded his skateboarding. And it's like, wow. I said, do you have a computer to edit this on? He's like, no. I said, let me get one for you. So I talked to IT. We got some some iMacs in our Rubies in our classrooms. They weren't the Rubies, they were the teal ones. And he started editing his videos during school. And he started sharing some of those videos, and they were really neat. I think that one of the things that my principal did was she did not stop me from bringing in this information, bringing in the tools. I was the last one in, a new guy doing something completely different. And that has always been the case for every single person, that every single principal that I've had has never gotten in the way of me trying to make my classroom a freer place, because I wanted to make sure that my students did have a voice in their classroom and to do the things that they needed to do.
Thanks, Rodney. That was an awesome story to hear. And I see some chat. And one thing I'll say, Christy put a message in about student voice, and student voice is amazing. However, if they are never offered choice, they really don't know how to make decisions. They need guidance in decision making as much as learning content. And that's so true. So if we're confined and bound and don't do anything and push them, like we're confining them to learning, basically what we have as far as our knowledge and skills, and we need to go beyond that. Anyone else?
I think the greatest challenge that teachers, administrators, the whole system creates is it's almost like the chains we wrap around ourselves. Because when we talk about giving students choice and voice, oftentimes teachers are hit with, well, I have a test that my kids have to pass. And so they don't get a choice and they don't get a voice, and there's no place for it. And so I'm always trying to challenge that through giving them a voice and choice, you're actually empowering them to learn much more than the test in order to be successful in the test and to go beyond. So I just wanted to drop that in there because we haven't talked about it much. But I think oftentimes the teacher being bound, we use that as kind of an excuse to keep us from doing things differently. Or it's easier to say, since we, well, at least in our state, we have a standardized test, then instruction should also be standardized because that's the way they pass. And I don't believe that. Anytime a student's truly learned an authentic experience, it was never through the most traditional teaching strategies that they learned that skill. It was always something that I had done different that maybe I hadn't done before. So I just want to lift that up, that sometimes we've got to remove the bounds of testing from our teaching in order for kids to be successful.
One thing too that I'm thinking is learning doesn't have to look any certain kind of way. And I think that's what we get stuck in sometimes is that everybody's learning the same way. So that differentiation piece is important, and students get the lessons at different times. That's also important to remember. And the last piece, I think, with those artificial boundaries of curriculum, sometimes we look at curriculum as a linear piece, a start and a finish, and we've got to respect that starting point, respect that finishing point. But the most important thing to remember is not only what is the lesson learned, but how do you want the students to apply what they've learned to life outside the classroom? And I think if we look at it that way, then we're never going to have to worry about being bound.
Definitely agree with that too as well, Paul. And Amy, you had a comment. I'm just going to throw it out there too. We do always hear it's like, that's the way we've always done it. And I mean, it was like the TTWAY, I think DI, I don't know. But Eric Schenninger had that in one of his books too, which I copied down. But it's so true. But it can be such a way, almost like to survive sometimes if you're new to a school, new to a classroom, and you got all of these things to go on throughout the day. You're pulled in so many different directions, and it's understandable. And I was that teacher for so long that I was doing everything like the same because I didn't have enough experience to know that I could take some chances and do something different. And I was doing what worked for me, but I wasn't considering that the kids, like, it wasn't going to work for them. And until I was able to, like, and they would come and ask me, hey, Mrs. Poth, can we do this? I'm like, no, we can't do that because we got to have the book and this and the test and that progression. So it's hard to shake that up because it's scary too. And to take that chance and to not know all the answers to how it's going to go. But until we kind of break free from the isolation or whatever it is that's kind of confining us to that, it's going to, I guess, stay status quo, like Paul said. All right, going to move on to number 3. And unlike the prior 2, I'm not going to give an example. I'm going to let you pick this one or come up with something for this one. And this is another favorite quote. There's so many great quotes out there, but this one also resonated with me. And it's from Scott Kaufman. And he said, often the labels kids receive become the lies they believe. And the only thing I'll say about that is back long ago, like self-fulfilling prophecy, Pygmalion effect, all of these terms started to come to mind when I thought about that. And I have a lot of experiences within my own school or just with connections that I have. And I've heard some different stories that relate to this, but I'd really love to just hear some of your stories.
If you don't mind, I'll start off with this one. When you're talking about labels make people feel safe. However, the thing is, in order to give somebody a label, there's a certain amount of power that you have to possess in order to give a label to anyone. And it takes courage to break down labels because labels eventually lead into stereotypes, and labels like devalue people and stop people from pursuing their full potential. Think about all the different examples that we come up with and why we're trying to change the status quo in regards to student learning. If you identify with a disability, you can't do this. We talk about achievement gaps that happen in so many different arenas. And to be quite honest, I am so passionate about breaking labels that I make it a point that no matter who the young man is, no matter who the young lady is, no matter who the teacher is, no matter who the person is I encounter, I want them to know they are more than their labels, and I am in their corner to help support them as they do their best and continue to move through life. And I'm not just saying at one particular grade level. I sincerely mean the duration of your life, that once you're one of mine, I'm going to stay with you on this journey because it's hard to break labels. It's one of the most devastating things that we do to people is put them in a box and then blame them for not getting out of the box. And we can do better, but that only happens when we continue to collaborate with one another.
Okay, and Dennis, I have to pop in after you. I said I wasn't going to say anything, but am I allowed to share a spoiler alert about you with the EduMatch book, Dennis? Can I? You cannot miss Dennis's passion. Okay, he is just, he's inspiring, and there's so many wonderful qualities about him, and I admire him so greatly, and I was so fortunate to meet him at Spark this summer. But I love what he puts out there, and you can tell just by that brief, what he just said. And so for the EduMatch book that I'll be having come out, Dennis will be writing a chapter, and it's focused on that quote and his experience with that. And so let me just tell you, it is powerful, and I cannot wait for everybody else to hear that story. So thank you, Dennis. Okay, now I'm going to stop.
Hey, folks, one thing I wanted to add about labels is labels are for soup cans. You know, inside the soup can is chicken soup. It's always going to be chicken soup, you know, whether it's hot or cold. But if we put labels on people, that means we put limitations on people. And we're saying that people can't change.
Paul, that was awesome. That was awesome. One of the things that I did, 2013 was a very turbulent year for me, I guess is a good way to say it. But one of the things that I did was I actually created a blurb, and it was about a minute. No, it's more like 3 minutes long. And one of the things that I did with it was I talked about labels, the labels that were placed upon me, and how I essentially needed to say, you know what? Just as Paul said, those are just what people call me and what I am. That's not who I am. This is who I am. I'm going to say who I am because I know what's inside. And there are other key people who are in my lives who are family and friends who have an inkling of that. And those labels that they use are ones that I'm going to put on myself. So if you put that on me, then you're trying to be safe and secure in the way that you see me. How about you take the blinders off your eyes and pay attention to what's really there? Get out of your own lens, get out of your own space, your own comfort zone, and to look at people for who they are. Don't look at their words, don't look at their skin, look at their actions. Look at who they really are. Then you're going to be able to see more clearly of who they truly are and what they're trying to say. And then that way you can adjust to how they're operating in their world. Sorry, I'm with Dennis. Labels are certainly a killer, a poison is what I like to call
them. And if I could just chime in off of what Rodney was saying, if I go back to what I said originally, a lot of times so many young adults grow up and become adults, and all they think about is the labels that were placed upon them when they were kids. And they say to themselves, how much differently would my life currently be if someone would have taken a second to just believe in me? And that's why that power of one is so important to me, because one caring adult can make the difference in not only a child's life, but a generation. And I don't know what's better than that. So that's why I love being an educator.
Thank you, Dennis. Anyone else? That one? So there was a comment in the YouTube that just even thinking back to, you know, being a child, different labels, or people think about you in a different way. And that's hard to break free from, I think, sometimes. And I don't know if any of your experiences, if it was something that you had when you were younger or not, or if there was a teacher. And I think that's just, whatever your experience may have been, what we do now, like I try to ask myself, like, what kind of teacher did I need at that point? Because I had some experiences with my teachers that they were not that great. You know, I don't want to say ridiculing or anything like that, but just not very conducive to making you feel good or like you could do something or that you could build the skill to do something. And so I think it's so important that, I mean, especially with us, if we have those experiences, like that kind of drives our passion, our purpose, I think, forward. So, and anyone else for this one? If not, I'll move.
This one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah. This one's actually huge for me. I was a military kid, and so oftentimes being a military kid, what the teacher didn't say said everything. Because I spend a lot of my time, every time we move, and I have to relearn the environment and all of the cues, all of those nonverbal cues. They were huge in telling me exactly how a teacher felt about me. And ironically enough, I had must have been second or third grade teacher. Her name was Miss Brown. Miss Brown in the USA. And at the time, they had just started like doing pullouts and interventions. This is early 90s to help kids. And I was one of those kids that needed the help because I was always behind because we constantly moved. And she hated it. She hated that I had to get taken out. But I know now that she didn't want me taken out of class, but it was all of the nonverbal cues and her frustration with me leaving that made me feel that she didn't like my presence in the class. At the time, I remember specifically because we were learning cursive, and so I would never catch up with the cursive, whatever letter we were working on, and then if I asked for help, she was irritated because I should have been there to get it to begin with. And so I'm a huge advocate for minding your words, but not just your words, but minding your silence too, because I think sometimes the silence is much more powerful than anything you could possibly say. And I'll never forget it. My father my mother was really upset about it. Like she was furious. And so my father told her, everyone's not going to love Martine the way you are. And so for my mom, I think it was a turning point in her realizing that, I was going to have challenges along the way with that parent perspective. But it was my first time just really feeling like, man, she doesn't want me to be part of this room. And I've always taken that with me, this attitude of no matter where I go, I want everyone to feel like they are part of the room in as many ways possible as I can make them feel that way.
Thank you for sharing that, Martine. And so that ties into this quote that is the next one in line. And that is, it's what a teacher doesn't say is a telling part of what a student hears. And so that's like spot on. Even when we don't think they're listening or hearing us, like they can see it in, every day it's like, I'll have a student say, oh, why did you give me that dirty look? And I'm like, I'm not giving any dirty looks. I might've just been like thinking and I turned and they catch that. Or so often they'll ask a question and you're not answering them. You're answering like the three other students or on the other side of the room. You're like, yes. And the student over here heard yes to I can go to my locker or whatever. So it's kind of funny, those interactions, how it happens. But I've been very reflective in my own, there's some times I've reacted to certain things. We all have stressors and things going on in our lives, and you come in and you're supposed to leave it outside the class or leave it outside the building. Sometimes that's hard because it might be affecting you. And there have been many times where I sat down and I apologized to students because I didn't handle something so well. So it's important to me, the interactions. So if anybody else has any experiences like that, you want to share?
Yeah, I think like always remembering that our kids are watching, like every day, all day long, they're watching everything that we do. And most of them want to mimic that because they truly love their teachers. But even as an instructional coach, our teachers are watching as well. They're watching how we react, how we interact, and all that good stuff. So I think it's just important to remember that that everyone's watching.
And I just wanted to add, Rachelle, if it was okay, Dennis made a great point with the labels and with the student observation. I think both of those elements make for angry parents as far as their experiences having as a kid and being a student, playing a direct role in how they interact with their own children's parents. Their own children's teachers, rather. I'm sorry. The second time around or the third time around, and it always makes me think about generational curses. So when you're looking at a family or a set of families or group of students, and maybe this is the third wave or fourth wave of the family, and there are things that haven't changed. I always think about within that school, that ecosystem, what's not being said that everybody's just continuing to have these behaviors over and over and over and over again, and how can we as educators break those changes? I think we play a huge role in it, especially when we're in communities where we have groups of students who are essentially generational. If I've been somewhere 15 years, I've taught their kids, and maybe I taught their parents my first year of teaching. if we don't see too much changing or we don't see a whole lot of success, what can we do differently to make a different impact? How can we be part of the breaking of that chain? And I think a lot of time people want to say, well, no, it's just how they are. Like, no, there's no just what can we do to help every kid be successful regardless of all of the feelings or possible feelings that may come from the parents as well.
If I can just chime in, and one thing that we often forget is that people feel, and kids, of if you are accepting of them or not. And a lot of times educators forget that before the kids come in, we might have a conversation, or we might talk about how this kid is giving us a rough time. And then that young man or young lady comes into your classroom, and we put on a smile, and we think that smile is good enough to cover up the feeling that they get from us. Every student, every person wants to feel validated in some area, some degree. And that lack of validation is a lack of a connection. And if you don't have that connection, then we're going to see the results that we often get. But if you can find a way to tap into a young man or a young lady and validate who they are as a person and how they are growing with you, they will love you for the rest of their lives. Because once again, you have that strong willpower and that belief that we're going to get through this together, that can just ultimately change the trajectory of their life.
Dennis, I got to tell you, man, you set it up all the time, man, ready for the next guy to knock it down. So I think as educators, we're so focused on the product, and we don't focus enough time on the process. And I'll give you an example. So we look at standardized test scores. That's that pressure that's there. You know, we always have to see improvement and how students are improving. And in that, one of the mistakes that educators frequently make is that they're racing to affect up here before they get into the heart. You know, so they've got to get to know who they're working with and build that rapport before they even think about getting into the mind. They got to build that trust and build that relationship. And if we don't have that, then we can't get the back end.
Yeah, that's a great point. One other thing I'll say, just as you're all talking, it reminded me of, you know, the students. It can't just be the students or the teachers. You know, you have to be out there and be present and be visible for them. And it's not just, I think for so long, I was just confining myself to the students in my classroom or the ones that I would just see passing by. And there are so many students out there that they may not have very many interactions, or like even just a smile, it can make such a difference. And I was reading late last night, and if anybody follows Danny Steele and Steele Thoughts on Twitter, there was a blog post out there, and it was basically the idea of sending out a lifeline and having lifelines where you have students that you want to check on, and maybe you don't necessarily see them or know them too well, but you go about it by asking them, hey, you know what, will you check on me? I'm having kind of a rough week or something. And it gives the students a little bit of like a connection to come in and check in with you, and you're like kind of checking in with them as well. And other people have been doing that, and it just seems like it's such a positive and simple way to show students that, you know, like, we need people to check on us too, and making that eye contact and having those smiles and all that. So thank you all so much for those great answers. And in saving,
can I say one thing really quickly?
No, absolutely. And then we're gonna do one more quote.
Yep. That specific point. So last year I worked in a school, and it was a very interesting experience for me. Let me just simply say that. It was a middle school, and it was a completely different type of middle school where I started my education in. It was very interesting. Anyway, I walked. One of the things that the kids knew me for is I would be in the hallways, because they asked us to be in the hallways and watch during transitions. So I was out there talking to kids, saying, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Where are you going? And just being out there, being smiley, and just walking with them. And some of the kids are like, why are you doing this? I said, because it's my job. But I don't know, why are you doing this? I said, because I want to make sure that you have a smiling face. One of the things that I learned really quickly in my career is that your face may be the first smiling face they see every single day, or the first one that they see on Monday morning that they haven't seen all weekend. So have that face that kind word, that smile, talking to them like they are humans. So that was something that was really fascinating to see just how kids reacted to that. There were several where I talked to them every single day. They're like, "Why do you keep talking to me?" I said, "Because I need to see a smile from you." I need to see a smile from you. Give me a smile and I'll stop talking. They gave me a smile, like, "Oh, you're smiling." Stop talking to me. I said, "No, I'm sorry, I lied, but I'm going to keep talking to you anyway." So it was great because they started warming up to me. And by the end of the year, it got to a point where several of the kids, they started looking to me as a person that they can talk to. And it was a wonderful, life-changing experience for them and also for me.
Y'all, I have to hop in on this. This is okay. So this is my PSA because we're about to go into a holiday break nationwide, and that whole spiel is never more important than it is January 2nd, if that's when you return back to work, or January 6th and 7th, if that's when you return back to work. I say this all the time. Kids need the worst things usually. In my experience, if anything bad is going to happen to a kid, it's going to happen those 2 weeks they're off. For some of our students, you're not going to know. The last time they ate was December 20th when they left your school. The last time they had anybody to care about them was and they are back some places January 7th. And so I just wanted to, that's just my little PSA. I'm going to be talking about it next week. How important it is to make sure that your kids feel the love when they return from a break, because so much happens on the break that you might be the only little ray of hope they have that's going to even get them through the winter months.
Martine, thank you. That is a great point. And honestly, not one that I was really ever aware of. I mean, I knew, in all schools there are students that are struggling. They don't have, the families are struggling, and it's just the stories, and you do the best that you can help, but you don't really necessarily think about that part. And I was reading, imagine that, the Rebecca Coda and Rick Jetter book, the Let Them Speak. And there was a story within there about students who may not be happy or excited to go home for a holiday break or over a long weekend because they don't have that community and that closeness, or somebody to talk to that cares about them, that has food for them, they're warm. And so that is a really important reminder. And another one that, even though the holidays are approaching or already started for many people, that's something we all need to keep in mind too, moving forward. So thank you. All right, last one for tonight. I trimmed it down because it's a great conversation. And this one I came across recently, and I really like this one as well. Of course, all quotes. I mean, there are so many great ones out there. It's a good teacher must be able to put himself in the place of students who find learning difficult or who find learning hard. So what do you think, or how do you interpret that? And that could be not necessarily even, the student. I mean, if you're a tech coach or administrator or something, like, what does that, do you have any experiences with something that relates to that quote? Unmute, Dennis.
Am I okay now? Okay. A lot of people might not know this, but I went an untraditional route to get into education. So through my programming, we had the summer to prepare, and then you started 3 months of summer school with limited class size, but you had like 2 or 3 adults, and then you started off. And one of the things that I really tried to bring to the class was I never wanted to forget what it was like to be a student. And I often tried to put myself in the shoes of that young man or that young lady and ask myself, if I was sitting here, what would I explicitly need the teacher to help me with so that I can understand this concept? And once I did that, instead of just looking at the textbook and looking at the pacing guide, things really started to turn around for me in my classroom, because I was really able to anticipate some of the misconceptions that the kids might have already had. But then I was also able to connect with them and deliver the content in a different way that really resonated with them, because I took the time to really get to know the kids and what they needed. So that's why I really always had a lot of kids that love math. And as many of you know, when you're a math teacher, it's black and white. Either you're right or you're wrong necessarily. But they were really starting to take the risk of participating more because of that connection that we had. But little did they know, I was already thinking about what they needed prior to the beginning of the lesson.
And I think that's important in all aspects of education, where teachers don't forget what it was like to be a student, and coaches don't forget what it was like to be a teacher, and principals don't forget what it was like to be a teacher as well. Just remembering where we all came from is so important in education.
And I'll add one thing in the chat. Pam, welcome, Pam. She said that, you know, one of the reasons that she's a special education teacher, and she can totally relate to the students because she wasn't a great student either until college. And, you know, and that is important to not forget what it's like to be a student, because for us, whatever the content is that we're teaching, I mean, we've been teaching it for however many years. I actually had a student 2 weeks ago say, "Do you study the night before?" And I said, "What do you mean, do I study?" Well, to learn what to teach us, to come out, "Oh yeah, I do that every day. I study the content." But they will say it comes easy to you, but I don't think that they realize all the practice and all the times and failures that we've had. And so it's important to share that part of the story as well. Anybody else?
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing too. I think it's about knowing your audience. I think that's hugely important. And if you know your audience, then you're going to be able to make the learning experience relevant for each and every learner.
So
Yeah.
I have
Sorry.
So I have something that I would like to expound upon from what Dennis had talked about, and that is understanding what students need to know, or what teachers need to know, being from the coming from a coaching aspect. One of the things that I realized is that school did come easy for me because I read books. I read encyclopedias. In fact, one of my favorite books to read was called Encyclopedia Brown, because he would read encyclopedias, which is what I did. So when I became a teacher, I thought, oh yeah, this is good. But that's the whole halo effect. Oh, I can be good at teaching because I know a lot. Not necessarily the case. So one of the things that I had to step back and do is what we like to call task analysis. If you don't analyze a task and know all the different pieces of what needs to be done, or to accomplish a learning, or to grasp a concept, to know what the terms are, what the where all the links go, then you're going to have a hard time teaching students how to grasp that concept. Right here in front of me, I've got note cards. I'm studying for my certified associates for project management, and this is an eye-opening experience for me, because so many concepts that are inside of project management can be related directly to teaching, can be related directly to coaching, to principals. I mean, it's like eye-opening to me, and I'm loving it because it helps me to understand the process that I've been through as a teacher to make sure that I do place myself in the student's spot. And I think that's why it's so important that one of the best practices, a great practice to do, is to actually sit down and to do the worksheet, to do the task that you're giving the student to do it for yourself first. And just as Dennis said, you are going to be able to understand where they're coming from and where the hangups are going to be. That's critical as a teacher. And students and teachers are going to see you as, oh, you understand what our issues are, and you're able to help us.
Thanks, Rodney. I wasn't sure you froze or if it was me that froze. The one thing that I was going to say about you, I had students a couple of years ago that like to write quotes or random things on the board. And one day, he didn't write it this exact same way, but there is a quote out there by Ignacio Estrada that said, if you can't teach a way the students learn, then you should, wait, I messed that up. Let me go back. I had it right there on my head. If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. And I came across that probably a couple months after he had written the quote. And I was like, you know what, you were totally onto something. Like, I need to understand like what makes this difficult, or, and they don't all learn the same way, and they don't, when we've heard it, all learn on the same day. So it's really interesting to keep all of these reminders. And out of all these quotes, as I've been listening to all of you talk, I'm very excited for what's going to come out with, you know, these books and the stories. And I'm so thankful for your time, especially on a Sunday. But so much of what I hear comes down to, in all of these, relationships. Like that is like a common, like if you filter everything down, it seems like that's what everything is. It's the relationships that we have with the students, with people we work with everybody, our PLN, whoever's supporting us. And if you don't take yourself out of that box or your isolation, which I didn't for years. I mean, I was just like doing my work, doing the same thing every day, and didn't break away from that. And so thankfully, I know all of you. Had I not done that, I wouldn't. And so just making that time for those relationships and being, leaning in and listening more is what I found, and getting out of the way more often. So I thank you all so much for these. I had more quotes. We keep talking all night, right? Just keep on going. But if we did, there wouldn't be enough content for the book. So we have to kind of wait a little bit on that for your stories. So I'm excited for it to come out and to share all of your stories. And anybody who's been listening on YouTube Live or watches it later on, thank you. Keep following the hashtags EduMatch and Quotes for EDU. And I'm going to kick it back over to Sarah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rachelle. Thank you so much to all of you on panel, everybody who was tuning in, everybody who was tweeting along with us, everyone who will be listening in the future. So definitely wanted to give a huge shout out to all of you, because you all are what makes this happen. So just wanted to give some quick shout outs really quickly before we sign off. So first to Irene Ball and her class. They will be doing the very last episode of EduMatch in 2018, which will be this Tuesday, December 18th, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can catch that same bad channel podcasts with an s.edumatch.org/tweet talk and check that out. In addition, wanted to give a huge shout out to all of the contributors for EduSnap 18. Woo, woo, woo. So we have several of them on panel. So definitely pick up your copy of that. That's going to be launching December 31st. We're going to have I misspoke. We are going to have a launch party. So it's not going to be an official EduMatch tweet and talk or an official EduMatch show. This is going to be invite only. So you have to join us on Zoom. So we'll be putting out like some info on that, and you will be invited to the exclusive launch party. So just keep posted for that. And in addition, let's see, we have other pre-orders also that are new this week. So we have Daddy's Favorites by Alyssa Frazier, or Alyssa Joy, as she is known for her pseudonym. So that book will be dropping on January the 8th, available in paperback as well as in on Kindle. And last but not least, we have Brian Kulak, his book Level Up Leadership, which will be launching the 21st of January. And that is also available as a pre-order on Amazon. So wanted to thank everybody for your insight, for your ideas tonight, and definitely keep posted. This will be available as a podcast, an audio podcast, as well as a replay on Facebook in the coming weeks. So everyone have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and definitely we'll see you all around. Bye-bye.